Okay, so good morning again to everybody, and we will start first with 3 bows to the Buddha. 1, 2, 3. And today is October 30th, 2021, and we will do the salutation to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, so we'll be now continuing our reading of the Anguttara Nikaya, Book of the Fours. And now we come to Sutta number 185. And the title of this sutta, or the theme, is Brahmin Truths. And so we have a little background, sort of narrative, giving the setting to the sutta. So the Buddha...
Larger, please, if you could.
Excuse me?
Could you make it a little larger, please, sir, if you could?
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
How is this?
That's beautiful. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so when the sutta begins, the Buddha is living at Mount Vulture Peak, which is outside the city of Rajagaha. And then a number of very well-known wanderers are living at a certain park on the bank of the river Sapini. And it mentions some of the wanderers. Apparently they were famous wandering ascetics of the period. Okay, and then a little bit strange, I guess the Buddha would have come down. It says that he emerged from seclusion and went to the wanderers' park on the bank of the river Sapini. So he must have come down from Vulture's Peak and walked to this park. And when he arrives, the wanderers are sitting together and they're having a discussion. The theme of the discussion are Brahmin truths. Yeah, in Pali, it's Brahmana Satya, Brahmana Satya, but Brahmana Sachani. And apparently there was different opinions, disagreements, what constitute Brahmin truths. The Buddha asked them what their discussion is about, and they explain that they've been discussing the theme of Brahmin truths. And then the Buddha says that there are, whatever they are discussing as Brahmin truths, he says that there are these 4 Brahmin truths that he has himself penetrated and realized with his own direct knowledge. And before we go into these truths, I just want to say a little bit about the Buddha's relations with the Brahmins, because there seems to be a certain ambiguity, or maybe you could say an ambivalence, 2 aspects in the Buddha's attitude towards the Brahmins. On the one hand, it seemed that the ideal of the Brahmin represented for the Buddha a kind of ancient spiritual ideal, which he incorporated into his own teaching by reformulating the idea of the Brahmin in terms of the Arahant. And so the way the Buddha conceives of the Brahmins in ancient times, and this would be long before the Buddha appeared on the scene, the Brahmins were models of sanctity, holiness, high spirituality, who are dedicated to the study and meditation, particularly to the meditation, the practice of the samapatis, the meditative attainments, the jhanas. And as time went by, according to some of the Buddhist texts, those Brahmins who couldn't master the meditative attainments then devoted themselves to the study of the Vedas, the sacred scriptures of the Brahmins. But they still represented the model of simple living, contentment with little, dedication to the spiritual ideal. And so the Buddha drew upon that old conception of the Brahmin as the holy man, and then reconceptualized it to bring it into accord with his own teaching, so that the true Brahmin for the Buddha becomes the Arahant, the one who has completed the spiritual task by eradicating all defilements and gaining the ultimate liberation. And in fact, the Buddha, like all of his contemporaries, formulates the spiritual path, or gives it the designation Brahmacharya. So it is the holy way of life, the divine life, the spiritual course of practice. Brahmacharya, the way to, the reason that the Brahmins were called Brahmins was because they were seen as the particular class of people who embody Brahma, understood as the spiritual power, the holy power behind the universe that manifests through and in the universe. And so the Brahmins are considered the people who have that special sort of representing in the human world that divine power of Brahma. And then the way of life that accords with that divine power, the way of life that leads to the realization of that divine power, is Brahmacharya. And one who completes the Brahmacharya becomes a true Brahmana, in the sense that the Buddha uses that term. And so if we look in the Dhammapada, and just let me get it. Yeah, the last chapter in the Dhammapada. Yeah, the last chapter of the Dhammapada is called the Brahmana Vagga, the chapter on the Brahmin. So he says it, I'll just recite a few verses. So verse 388 says, because he has discarded evil, he is called a Brahmana. Because he has discarded evil, he is called a Brahmana. He who does, now 391, he who does no evil by body, speech, or thought, that is the one I call a Brahmana. But then he says it is not by lineage, not by birth, that one becomes a Brahmana, but one in whom there is truth and righteousness. And here the words used is satyang and dhammo. So one who has truth and dhamma. He is a Brahmana. Then 396, verse 396, I do not, and this is directed against the idea of the Brahmana as one who is born into a particular social caste. I do not call a person a Brahmana because of his lineage or because of his highborn mother. If he has attachments, he's just a arrogant man, but one who is free from impediments and clinging, that is the one that I call a Brahmana. And so it goes on and on and on. Again, this always repeatedly describing the Brahmin as in effect, as the Arahat, the Holy One. Verse 402, one who in this very life realizes the end of dukkha, who has laid aside the burden and become emancipated, that is the one I call a Brahmana. Okay, so the Buddha, in this sense, shows that he has high esteem for the original ideal that the Brahmin was supposed to represent, but he's also quite critical of the Brahmins of his time on at least three grounds. One is the idea that being a Brahmin is something determined by one's birth, that the idea that if one is born into a certain caste, one therefore is entitled to certain privileges, certain respect from others, and the idea that one becomes morally pure or superior to others because of one's birth, because of one's social status. So the Brahmins taught sort of their idea of the way they explain the caste system. They explain it as part of the act of creation by the god Brahma, Mahabrahma. So they say that the Brahmins were born from the mouth of Brahma. So they are the highest. They come from the head, specifically from the mouth. The Kshatriyas, those are the administrators, the warriors, are born from the arms of Brahma, because the arms represent strength, power, capacity to accomplish things. So the Kshatriyas, the rulers, administrators, are born from the arms. The third social class are the Vaishyas. The Vaishyas are the merchants and the landowners, the agriculturalists. So those are said to be born from the thighs of Mahabrahma, because the thighs are what uphold the upper part of the body. And so it's the Vaishyas that serve with strength as the social foundation, the businessmen, the merchants, the landowning agriculturalists, and so forth. And then the fourth caste are the Shudras, the menials, the workers, the servants, and they are said to be born from the feet of Brahma. And then there's large groups of people who don't fit into any of those four social castes, and they are called the outcasts, who in later times become the untouchables or the Dalits. And so the Buddha rejected this Brahmanic explanation of a divine origin of the caste system. And the Buddha explained that the caste system was just a social convention which originated through historical conditions. It was not the fiat expressing the divine will of Brahma, the creator God. So the first ground on which the Buddha criticized the Brahmins was because of their stipulation of a divinely created caste system in which the Brahmins hold the superior position. And in fact, when the Buddhist texts enumerate the 4 social castes, what they do is to invert the order of the first 2, because probably because the Buddha was a Kshatriya. So they put the Kshatriya in the first position and the Brahmins in the second position. Yeah, a second ground on which the Buddha criticizes the Brahmins is because the Brahmins devoted themselves to the performance of sacrifices, and in time, their sacrifices became increasingly violent, involving the slaughter of animals. It seems the way the Buddha conceived the origin or the evolution of the Brahmins. And one could find this in particular in a sutta in the Sutta Nipata called the Brahmana Dhamma Sutta, the tradition of the Brahmins, that in early times, the Brahmins led very devout lives, very pious lives. They observed celibacy for the first 48 years of their lives. And they devoted themselves to the quest for knowledge and conduct. And when they performed sacrifices, they performed them with things like rice, ghee, and oil, but they didn't slaughter animals. But then in time, the Brahmins became corrupted, and then they promoted animal sacrifice. And so this is depicted in the sutta and the Sutta Nipata, how when they became corrupted, they coveted abundant wealth, herds of cattle and women, and then they composed hymns, and they approached the king, and they told the king to perform sacrifices on their behalf and to pay them for the sacrifices. And the Brahmins would perform the sacrifices, and in return for the sacrifices, the king would give the Brahmins cattle, bedding, clothes, women, chariots, and other things. And then the Brahmins came to the king and told the king to sacrifice cattle. And in this way, the cattle came to be sacrificed in large numbers. So this is one of the criticisms of the Buddha of the Brahmins, the performance of animal sacrifices. And then a third ground for criticism was that the Brahmins became overcome because of their high caste status. They were overcome by arrogance, conceit, and haughtiness towards others, and they became increasingly corrupted by defilements. But the Buddha still continually retained this ideal conception of the ancient Brahmins as those who embodied the quest for purity, for truth, for higher states of consciousness, for a kind of divine status here on earth. And so in this sutta, he's picking up on that expression, Brahman truths, and giving his own interpretation of what is meant by Brahman truths. And now he's going to speak of 4 Brahman truths. So what are these 4 Brahman truths? Okay, the first is, he says, a Brahmin says thus, all living beings are to be spared. That is actually the Pali word that's used here is vajja, which is based on the verb vadati, to be killed, to be slaughtered. So it means, and then it's negated with the prefix a. So the sense is that living beings are not to be slaughtered. So in this way, with this Brahmin truth, the Buddha is sort of almost directly criticizing the common practice amongst the contemporary Brahmins of conducting animal sacrifices. And again, we see another example of these animal sacrifices. Now I seem to have lost it. Yeah, it's in a sutta in the Anguttara Nikaya, chapter 3, the Kosala Sangyutta. I think it's sutta number 9 or 10. Gee, I just had it. I must have closed it. Yeah, when the sutta takes place, King Pasenadi of Kosala, who was supposed to be a disciple of the Buddha, has arranged a great sacrifice with 500 bulls, 500 bullocks, hundreds of other cows, goats, rams, are all being led to the sacrificial pillar. And then the slaves, servants, and workers are being whipped and punished in order to prepare the sacrifice. And then the monks go into the town on alms round, they see this, and they report it to the Buddha. And then the Buddha says that all of these types of sacrifices that involve violence, the killing of living beings, do not bring great fruit. And the wise seers of right conduct do not go to that sacrifice where goats, sheep, and cattle are slain, but they go to these sacrifices that are free from violence, where no animals are killed. And so that would be, the Buddha here is sort of reconceptualizing the idea of sacrifice away from the practice of animal sacrifice towards the offering of alms to mendicants, to his own disciples, and to other wandering ascetics. And so this is the first Brahminic truth. And so he says, speaking thus, a Brahmin speaks truth, not falsehood. And then this is important, the next point. On this account, he does not imagine himself or conceive himself with the idea, I am an ascetic, or I am a Brahmin. And he does not imagine, I am better, or I am equal, or I am worse. And I think with this statement, the Buddha is again sort of launching a subtle attack on the Brahmins of his time, who are very proud of their status as being Brahmins. And sometimes they would claim the Brahmins are the supreme caste, all the other castes are inferior. The Brahmins are pure, the other castes are impure. The Brahmins spring from Brahman's mouth, the other castes spring from the lower parts of Brahma's body. And so here the Buddha is sort of attacking that conceit, that arrogance, that haughtiness of the Brahmins by saying one doesn't think I am better or I am equal, I am worse. But he says, having directly known this truth, one is practicing out of sympathy and compassion for living beings. So the words here are, Yeah, so I think sympathy here is anudaya, or actually the stem form would be anudaya, which has the sense of kindness out of sympathy. And then anukampa is the active aspect of compassion. So we have two words in Pali that can be rendered as compassion. The word we're probably most familiar with is karuna, which occurs particularly as the second of the four Brahmaviharas. And that sort of represents more the meditative or inward side of compassion. And then the other word, we have it right here, is anukampa, which represents, I call this the active side of compassion. And it comes from the prefix anu, which suggests along with, and kampa means shaking. So anukampa is shaking along with. So it's the quality that makes the heart shake or tremble along with the suffering of others. So if you attend the Wednesday evening meditation sessions, you hear me say at the beginning that you direct the mind, you settle the mind in the heart, where you feel a kind of soft, warm, bubbly feeling. And that warm, soft, bubbly feeling, that is the sort of root or support for anukampa, the trembling along with, shaking along with the suffering of others. And so out of this compassion for others, this sympathy and compassion for living beings, whether in this case it's not human beings, but it will be the animals, cattle, goats, rams, the other animals that will be sacrificed in these Brahminic ceremonies. One does not slaughter them, one does not kill. Okay, now we'll go on to the second Brahminic truth. So this is the truth that all sensual pleasures are impermanent. I would use the Pali word here, dukkha. Maybe we could say bound up with suffering and subject to change. And so speaking thus, a Brahmin speaks truth, not falsehood. Again, he doesn't misconceive himself as an ascetic or Brahmin, doesn't think I'm better, I am equal, or I am worse. But having known the truth in that, he is practicing simply for disenchantment with sensual pleasures, for their fading away and cessation. Okay, now it seems to me, this is my interpretation, that this is not pointing to the directly to the path to liberation, to the path to nibbana, but rather the way I see it, this is pointing to the path that leads to the renunciation of sensual pleasures, the renunciation of sensual desires, the desire for the enjoyment of sensual pleasures, in order to cultivate the practice leading to the Brahma world, and that would be to rebirth in the form realm. And that would be the practice of the jhanas. So we know, if you know the formula for the jhanas, vivicheva kamehi vivicha akusalehi dhammehi. So the formula for the jhanas begins, that having separated oneself from sensual pleasures, having become secluded from sensual pleasures, then one enters and dwells in the first jhana. So in order to turn away from sensual pleasures and direct the mind towards the renunciation of sensual pleasures and the attainment of this higher levels of consciousness that culminate in the jhanas, one has to reflect, to contemplate, to investigate and understand the unsatisfactory, unsatisfying nature of sensual pleasures. And one way to do this, or sort of one theme for reflection, is to see that all sensual pleasures are impermanent. Whatever one desires, one obtains, those pleasures don't last. The pleasures eventually fade away. We get the things we want, nice house, nice car, a lovely partner, um, all the enjoyments of the worldly life. But either those things are impermanent and vanish, or the enjoyment that we get from them starts to lose its charge, its power, and we become dissatisfied with them. So when we see that the sensual pleasures are impermanent, and then there's some element of dukkha tied up with them, we cling to the pleasures that we are enjoying, and we hold to them tightly, and in holding to them, there's some element of anxiety underlying them, a fear that they're going to change, a kind of need to grasp onto them, an undercurrent of worry and concern. And so even when we're enjoying these sensual pleasures, they're not able to give full satisfaction. And then eventually, those objects of pleasure will change, or the enjoyment will fade away. And then we become disillusioned with those objects of enjoyment. And normally, if we don't have the guidance of the Buddha Dharma, then when we lose interest in one set of sensual pleasures, then the mind turns to another set of sensual pleasures. Okay, so in this way, sensual pleasures, one reflects that sensual pleasures are impermanent, bound up with suffering and subject to change. Yeah, I had some other references here. Yeah, this was an interesting passage. This is in the Majjhima Nikaya, Sutta number 106. That is the path to the imperturbable. And what is meant by the imperturbable, the ananja, is the fourth jhana and the formless meditations above the fourth jhana. And so in this sutta, the Buddha explains various ways to reach the imperturbable. And the first of these, the noble disciple reflects thus. Actually here, sensual pleasures are impermanent, hollow, false, deceptive. They are illusory, the prattle of fools. Sensual pleasures here and now, sensual pleasures in lives to come, and so forth. All of these are Mara's realm, Mara's domain, Mara's bait. And because of these, bad, unwholesome mental states arise, and they're an obstruction to a noble disciple in training thus. And so one reflects in this way, and then one determines to develop a mind that's abundant and exalted, which transcends this world. And when one does this, then it eventually leads to the imperturbable. That is, one passes through the lower three jhanas, reaches the fourth jhana, or the formless meditations, above the fourth jhana. Okay, so this is the second Brahman truth. And according to some of the suttas in the Anguttara Nikaya Book of Fives, the Buddha explains that the ancient Brahmins, again, this was long, thousands of years before the Buddha's own time, the ancient Brahmins would renounce, even in youth, they would renounce the world and go into seclusion. And in seclusion, they would develop the four Brahmaviharas, the immeasurable minds of loving kindness, compassion, altruistic joy, and equanimity, or they would develop the four jhanas. But in later times, including up to the Buddha's time, the Brahmins lost the interest in renunciation and meditation practice and became entangled in sensual pleasures. Okay, then we come to the third Brahman truth. And here I think we're coming closer to the heart of the Buddha's teaching. So here the Brahman says thus, all states of existence are impermanent, suffering, and subject to change. Let us get the Pali here. Yeah, the text is a little bit abbreviated. Yeah, the word that's used is bhava. And what is meant here by states of existence? In English translation, it's a little obscure because we don't really have a satisfactory term in English for bhava. What I would say, I would explain bhava as an individual state of existence in any of the many realms of existence, an individual course of life that begins with birth or even further back with conception and ends in death. So we maybe say an individual life term, an individual course of life. And in the Buddha's teaching, these courses of life, these bhavas, can take place in the three realms of existence. So what are the three realms of existence?
Kamaloka,
Yeah,
Rupaloka,
yeah.
Arupaloka.
Okay, good. Yeah, the size is not so good. Okay, so it's kama bhava. This is the sensual or desire realm of existence, the states of existence in which sensual desire is the driving force of the beings in those realms of existence. So kama bhava includes the lower planes of existence, the hell realms, the animal realm, the realm of ghosts, and it also includes the human realm and the heavenly realms, the six heavenly realms. So that we can say that this is the lower realms, human realm, and the heavenly realm. Then the Rupa Bhava are those realms of existence in which sensual desire has temporarily faded away. And it's a realm in which subtle material form remains. Please, everybody should mute their microphone. Okay. There's subtle material form here, and the beings here have extremely long lifespans. They're very beautiful, very powerful, and most of the time they remain absorbed in jhanic samadhi. But existence in the form realm is also impermanent. It's not everlasting. And so there are many levels to the form realm, ranging from the levels of existence that correspond to the 4 jhanas, but they're all, and existence in the form realm is attained through mastery over the jhanas. And the jhana creates a powerful karma that propels the consciousness into the form realm. But once that karmic force is exhausted, then the beings in the form realm pass away and take rebirth elsewhere. Then above the form realm of existence are the formless realms of existence. And these are the realms of existence that correspond to the formless meditative absorptions. In these states of existence, there's no more material form. The beings here consist only of consciousness and mental formations. And there are 4 levels in the formless realm: the realm of boundless space, boundless consciousness, realm of nothingness, realm of neither perception nor non-perception. And one is reborn into these realms through mastery over the formless meditative absorptions. But again, when existence in these planes comes to an end, one passes away and takes rebirth elsewhere. So for this reason, the Buddha teaches that the aim of the path is not to be reborn in any of these realms of existence, but to attain release or liberation from all conditioned states of existence, because all states of existence are impermanent, suffering, and subject to change. So again, a Brahmin, when a Brahmin says this, he speaks truth, and having directly known that truth, he is practicing for disenchantment with all states of existence, for their fading away and cessation. But I think the problem for the Brahmins in the Buddha's time is that though they might have aspired for release from all states of existence, for nirvana, for final liberation, they didn't know the way or paths to ultimate liberation. And that was the purpose of the Buddha's appearance in the world, to discover and show the way to release from all states of existence. Okay, let's go now to the 4th Brahman truth. And this is a rather tricky one. Okay, and the translation here is a bit speculative or hypothetical. So here a Brahmin says thus: I am not anywhere the belonging of anyone, nor is there anywhere anything in any place that is mine. Yeah, the Pali for this is rather obscure. It could even be a corruption of an ancient formula that was used amongst in the contemplative circles of the Buddha's time. So here, let me increase the size so that you could see the note better. here we have the Pali for the formula. Nahung, this is not I, kvachana, anywhere, kasachi of anyone, kinchana tasman, a bit obscure expression, maybe in anything. Nucha and not mama of me, kvachana, anywhere, kattachi, again, anywhere, kinchana tatti, is there anything? Now this formula, it seems, was not an invention of the Buddha, not unique to the Buddha's teaching, because we find it in the Anguttara Nikaya, in the Book of Threes, used by the Nigantas, the Jains, as a way of cultivating the idea of non-possession. So we have it, this is in the Book of Threes, I think it's Sutta number 70. Yeah, number 70. So here the Buddha is sort of ridiculing the way the Jains observe the Uposatha, the Poyade. So on the Uposatha day, they tell their disciples thus, come, having laid aside all clothes, that the Jains themselves, the ascetics, go naked. And now they're telling their lay disciples to take off all of their clothes and then recite this formula. I am not anywhere the belonging of anyone, nor is there anywhere anything in any place, anything that is mine. I have to say, sometimes I think the Buddhist texts do not represent the Jains very accurately. But because the Jains and the Buddhists were rivals operating in the same territory, so there's a kind of competition for support going on between them. Anyway, so this is a formula that the Brahmins are said to assert. And speaking thus, a Brahmin speaks truth, not falsehood, and he does not conceive himself an ascetic or a Brahmin. He does not misconceive, I am better or equal or worse. Rather, having directly known the truth in that, he is practicing the path of nothingness, the path to the state of nothingness. And actually we find again in the Majjhima Nikaya Sutta number 106, this formula is used as a meditation device for attaining the base of nothingness. Let us take a look at that sutta. Section 8. So here the text says, the noble disciple considers thus, I am not anything belonging to anyone, anywhere, and so on. And when he practices in this way and frequently abides thus, his mind acquires confidence in this base. Once there is full confidence, he either attains to the base of nothingness now, or he resolves upon it with wisdom. And then on the dissolution of the body after death, it is possible that his consciousness will pass on to rebirth in the base of nothingness. Okay, so this seems to be the way I would see this in connection with this sutta, that this is a Brahmin truth that the Brahmins may have used as a kind of meditative tool for attaining the state of nothingness, the meditative absorption. The meditative absorption is called the akincanyayatana. And the Akinchanyayatana is the third level in the formless realm of existence. And so if you remember the story of the Buddha's quest for enlightenment, the way we find it, especially in Majjhima Nikaya Sutta number 26, when the Buddha was still a seeker of enlightenment, the Bodhisattva, he went to a teacher named Alara Kalama, and he became a disciple of Alara and learned Alara's meditative system, which led to the base of nothingness. But the Bodhisattva realized that the base of nothingness was not the highest goal. And so then he rejected Alara as a teacher and went on, continued his quest for enlightenment. And we don't find in the suttas any explanation of what meditative method Alara actually taught. But this sutta makes me think that it's possible that the theme of meditation that Alara was teaching would have been this, using this formula as a way to overcome all clinging and grasping, but not in the final way, not in the way to be achieved through wisdom, but rather as a practice leading to deeper levels of samadhi. And so one keeps on giving up whatever arises in the mind until the mind becomes completely void or evacuated of all thoughts, conceptions, notions, bases of dwelling places, bases of attachment. And then one enters into the meditative absorption of nothingness. But this base of nothingness leads, if it's not accompanied by wisdom and doesn't proceed to insight, to panya or vipassana, then it will lead only to rebirth in the formless realm. And so for the Brahmins, this was a truth, but it was not a truth leading to ultimate liberation, but only to rebirth in the realm of nothingness. So these are four Brahmin truths that the Buddha proclaims on the basis of his direct knowledge. But while these can be part of the path to enlightenment, they're not the ultimate way to enlightenment, which of course requires the understanding of dependent origination, the three marks of impermanence, dukkha, anatta, and the realization of the Four Noble Truths. Okay, let us see if we have any questions. And as usual, if you have questions, then you go to the box where you raise your hand. Okay, I see some questions coming up. So we'll start with Wesley.
Hi, thank you, Bante. So my question was regarding something that you mentioned with the third Brahmin truth,
Yeah.
with the transmigration to the states of existence.
Yeah.
You seem to have, I mean, it sounded like in quick passing, you sort of mentioned about how, we're reborn in the heaven realm or the form realm, and then until our karma burns up, and then, we return from that realm. I've sort of heard that explanation before in terms of, generating karma and burning karma.
Yeah.
But every time I hear it, it sort of, I don't know, it doesn't satisfy me, mainly because it just kind of makes it feel like the human realm is sort of the default state and the only place where we can make karma, and that the rest of the realms are just burning that karma.
No, I don't. Yeah, I don't think that is the case at all. Yeah. Anyway, go on. Continue.
Oh yeah, well yeah, because I was gonna say like that. it's same here. I don't, that just doesn't seem like the case just because of the rarity and, briefness of the human existence. It kind of seems, not right. I mean, I'm not saying that you said this, just, the common explanation that I've heard. It just seems like it's not, correct in that sense that, that the entire, transmigration through existence depends on actions in the human realm. So I was wondering if maybe you could clarify or maybe, clear up that sort of notion that I hear going around.
Yeah, it's certainly it's not the case that it's only in the human realm that one creates karma, and that in the other realms one doesn't create karma at all. It's pretty complex, I think. What I would think is that it would seem that the hell realms and the heavenly realms, let us say all the realms of existence, arise through the ripening of karma, and each realm of existence corresponds to particular types of karma. So the lower realms correspond to unwholesome karma, the higher or realms beyond the human correspond to superior types of karma. But what is the driving force behind karma is volition, and beings in all of the realms have volitional states of consciousness. So it seemed to me that in all of those realms, beings generate karma. Maybe it's the case in the human realm that there's the greatest range of possibilities for creating karma. But I would think it's the case in all of the realms that the beings there create karma. And that's dealt with in greater detail in the Abhidharma system. I believe I discussed that in one of the Abhidharma classes that I had given through our Buddhist Association and the Dharma College. Yeah, but it's certainly it's not the case that only the human beings create karma, and the other realms are entirely resultants.
Thank you,
Okay,
Bhante.
yeah. Okay, Marcel.
Thank you, Bhante. I'd like to ask about the second Brahmin truth, specifically about sensual pleasures. I'm wondering if sensual pleasures caused by lust is the hardest one to overcome for all beings.
Say it again.
Sensual pleasures by lust,
Yeah.
is it the hardest one to overcome for all beings?
I don't know whether it's the hardest to overcome. Let's say it's pretty hard to overcome, but maybe for different people, different fetters are probably, though, the craving for existence, the bhava tanha, would be deeper and more fundamental than sensual craving or sensual lust. But in our ordinary life, the craving for existence doesn't appear so it doesn't become manifest so easily. So in our day-to-day life, it's the craving for sensual pleasures which usually preoccupies the mind. Yeah, so in that way, I would say it's the one that we have to work with initially. And then when we overcome the craving for sensual pleasures, then we can directly confront the craving for continued existence. Yeah, so that would be my answer to that question.
Okay, thank you, Bhante.
Okay, Ashish. Ashish, maybe you're okay.
Yes, hi, Bhante. Bhante, my question is the system taught by Alara Kalama Sankhya philosophy? Do we have any references in the canon?
Say again.
Is the system taught by Alara Kalama to
Yeah.
the Buddha?
Yeah.
Was it Sankhya? Do we
There's-
have any reference?
Yeah, there's no explicit statement about what the actual in terms of the classical systems of Indian philosophy, there's no correlation of what Alara taught with any of those classical systems of Indian philosophy. But I believe that there is a later work, maybe from the 1st century, ascribed to Ashvaghosha, the poet called Ashvaghosha, called the Buddha Charita. It's a beautiful poetic work in classical Sanskrit on the life of the Buddha, which I think connects the system of Alara Kalama to the Sankhya system of philosophy.
Okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
but there's not an explicit mention of the Sankhya system in the Pali Nikayas. There are
Okay, thanks.
there are references to the Sankhya system in the Visuddhimagga, probably, and some other commentaries, but we don't find it explicitly mentioned in the Nikayas.
Okay, thanks.
It's an interesting question. Somebody should research that, but I haven't looked into it myself.
Because Sankhya doesn't believe in the concept of God.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, that is
yeah.
true. We don't find references to Brahma or Ishvara in the systems
yeah.
of Alara Kalama or the other
Right.
teacher, Uddaka Ramaputta.
Right. Okay, thanks.
Okay, V, is this Vinyu?
Good morning, Bhante.
Good morning.
I have this question regarding the Brahmin.
Yeah.
Where is the origin of the Brahmin? Brahminism seems to be precede the Buddhism. Would they have any connection to the Indus Valley civilization, the very origin of the Brahmanism?
Oh, yeah. I mean, definitely. The Brahmins probably originated from, I think it's from the Eurasian mountains. The people who inhabited the Eurasian mountains migrated, maybe this goes back to 5,000 BC, in different directions. So they split into 2 divisions, one division going west, and eventually came down into southern Europe, into Greece, and what is now Italy, becoming the ancestors of the Greeks and the original Romans. And then the other branch went eastward and then divided into several branches. One went down into what used to be called Persia and is now called Iran. And in fact, I've seen some speculation that the word Iran was actually a way of pronouncing Aryan, because these were the people who called themselves the Aryans. And then the other branch went over the Hindu Kush mountains into what is now called India, probably Pakistan and India. And those tribes then became the ancestors of the Brahmins. And they subjugated the original inhabitants of the Indus Valley civilization, perhaps pushing them further south, maybe exterminating them. And in time, as they entered into India proper, they became the Brahmins.
I'm not sure whether you come across a seal of a yogi seal, a Mahayogi seal in the Indus.
Yeah, I've seen that, yeah.
Do you think that yoga or meditation would have started the origin, say, from the Indus Valley, possible? Or even further, I mean, probably before?
I think that would be a question that would be an anthropologist who has studied that subject would have to answer. I don't feel qualified to speculate about that myself.
Yep, thank you. Thanks, Bhante.
Okay, we'll have time for one more question. This will be Marcel.
Thanks, Bhante, for taking my question again. So I'd just like to follow up with Wesley's question, the first question, about burning up karma. I understand Bhante answered that all realms were able to generate volition or generate karma.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
is it true that human realms are the most conducive to practice towards liberation?
The human realm is most conducive to liberation.
Yes.
I've seen that commonly said. I'm not so sure whether it's exclusively true. What is said is that the human realm is the realm in which Buddhas arise. So when a bodhisattva is going to attain Buddhahood, then they always take rebirth in the human realm, because it's in the human realm where there is the balance of pleasure and pain, happiness and suffering, some middle way between shortness of lifespan and length of lifespan. But we also find that, so in that case, for those reasons, the Buddha arises in the human realm. But it's not only the case that human beings are the only ones who listen, who hear and practice the Buddha's teaching. We find even when the Buddha gave the first discourse, according to the Dhammacharya Sutta, there were thousands and thousands of deities who were listening in on the teaching and who presumably attained the stages of Sotapatti, stream entry, and higher stages of realization. So it seems that beings in other realms of existence can attain the various stages of enlightenment. But the one that we know about best ourselves is the human realm. So maybe we have to focus our attention on this realm, not worry too much about other realms.
Okay. Thank you very much, Bhante. Okay,
we'll have to stop the class now. And before we do the sharing of the merits, I want to mention that this afternoon, from 1 to 3 p.m. on Eastern Time, my organization, Buddhist Global Relief, we will be having a special presentation on putting compassion into action. It's called the National Event, Buddhist Action to Feed the Hungry. Please, if you're able to, if you're free this afternoon, please go to the website of Buddhist Global Relief, and you'll find the link there to register for that event and join us for that event. We'll be having 5 Dharma speakers giving short Dharma talks, as well as short overviews of Buddhist Global Relief projects around the world that provide assistance to communities suffering from hunger and malnutrition, showing the way we help them emerge from poverty and escape the scourge of hunger. Okay, so let us then do the sharing of the merits. So I'll recite the verses. Akasata Jabumata Deva Naga Mahidika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakantu Sasanang. Akasata Jabumata Deva Naga Mahidika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakantu Desanang. Akasata Jabumata Deva Naga Mahidika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakantu Mang Parang. Bhavagopadaya Vichi Dukha Pata Jani Dukha Baya Pata Jani Baya Soka Pata Jani Soka Hantu Sabepi Panino. May those in suffering be free from suffering. May those in fear be free from fear. May those in sorrow be free from sorrow. May all living beings also be thus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Bhante.
Thank you,
yeah.
Bhante.
Thank you, Pante.
How to Bhante.
Okay, we do.
See you
Okay,
again.
okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, Bhante. Thank you,
Okay.
Bhante.
Okay,
Thank you,
thank you.
Bhante.
Thank you.
Okay,
Be
thank you.
safe, Bhante.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you,
See you later,
Bhante.
Bhante.
Thank you,
Okay,
Bhante.
okay, okay, thank you.
Bye, Bhante.
Enjoy your lunch.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we'll end now.